short comment I want to make about the user experience right from the beginning when we started to register .fu domain names. Some people, I know some businesses proposed .com to some institutions, including businesses, but everyone decided to go .fu. I haven't been with the operator for the last 7 or 8 years, so I don't know what the experience is now, but that's a small experience I want to share right from the very beginning of .fu.
Okay, I think the first question was why Australia and New Zealand and not other, or were there valid comparisons to other Pacific countries?
Sorry, clarification. I think it's good to look at Australia and New Zealand, but I was wondering if you also could consider one or two other Pacific Island nations. Oh, it would be interesting to see the approaches.
Ends of the spectrum are completely opposite. So, but you know, it's a valid question. It's just, you know, the Pacific is there. Now, sorry, your second question was.
It's just a comment. I was sharing my experience from the very beginning of .fu. It's not a question, it's a comment.
Okay. Yes, I think it raised in my mind, though, the idea of where .vu could be heading over the next 10 years. And if you look at the penetration of domain names in Australia and New Zealand at about that 14–15% of population, that should mean that Vanuatu could reach 13 or 14,000 domain names over the next few years. And I think you'll see much more interest and much more activity around .vu as broadband rolls out and as more and more people start using the internet. So a lot of local small businesses, each of the little shops and maybe some of the taxis and buses and things will have their own little website and their own domain name and be able to do a lot more of their own transactions. And plumbers and builders and you know, painters and all the little trades should all be, will be thinking about how do I capitalise on the opportunities of using the internet to get my business, get more business for me and so on.
Thank you. Do we have any more comments or user experience?
Cameron, I work at the TRR. I think that many people in Vanuatu would have an affinity with .vu. I think most people that live here, whether they're Ni Vanuatu or expatriates, for many things in Vanuatu, tend to associate with the sort of Vanuatu version of things. So another example is with Air Vanuatu. People are quite happy to spend $20 extra to fly Air Vanuatu than Virgin. And certainly as a user of the internet, when I find a company that doesn't have .vu, I notice it and I think sort of slightly less positively about it. On the other side of the coin, the difference really is, if you're a business, is that cost and that ease of doing it. So if you're a business, there is that value that you get from the consumers, but the difficulty in understanding the policies as they are now, the difficulty in getting it registered. Frankly, although there's a trust from users in the .vu brand, the trust from a supplier is probably not there because it's probably not as consistent as some of these large .coms and things like that. So that's where I think if we could improve that, then that's certainly where the users will drive it. And then the businesses here will look to it as well, because I think most businesses based in Vanuatu will find the value if it's available from having a .vu name.
Thank you, Cameron. Just know that when you get the mic, say your name and the organization you're representing. So as CNS is here, they're dealing a lot with domain names, and maybe they would share their experience and maybe discuss possible policies that they would like to see.
Yes. Joseph from CNS. Thank you, everyone. As a user experience, and we're also working with lots of our client hosting services. I think one of the problem is many people they go for .com because of the cost, and as you said, for trust. But we always try to encourage people to use .vu as a local product. For example, with us for CNS, we use .vu. We try to promote ourselves as a local company. That's why we're using VU. So we push people to use VU as a local, local provider and a local product. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. We still have about less than 10 minutes, 8 minutes left on this experience and Q&A. So, okay. Seems there's no more further discussion on that and ask questions. So we will go up to our next part of the session, which is group discussions. So we will break out probably into a few groups. Just feel free to make up these groups. So if we can have probably four groups, 1, 2, maybe 3 and 4 this side. And there's a question on your paper there, which says, why should there be a reserved name list in the .vu registry? So that is the question. Maybe, Kit, would you like to elaborate a bit on these questions before we break out into the discussion?
Yeah, I think, just think about for you and your business and your family and your school and your church, think about the things that are important, and would you think that restricting names and reserving names is good for .vu or bad for .vu? And can you see that you can set a path here that will allow a more open access to .vu or a more closed access to it, and think about the benefits of if you restrict, that you prevent harm in some ways. If you're open, you're maybe leading to more harm, but also there's costs and resources that are consumed and so on. So have a think about those sorts of issues, and that's what we can concentrate our discussion on.
Thank you, Kit. So maybe the breakout session, you can use the chairs outside to have your discussion and come back. Please feel free and relax to discuss this, and when you come back, we'll call you in, and maybe one leader of the group will sort of present what you have discussed. So you have now until probably half an hour, up until half an hour to have the discussion. Then we'll bring you in for maybe 2-3 minutes, and then we will break out for a tea break this morning. So please feel free to join any group, mix yourself up, and let's have the discussion. Thank you.
And could I just say too, please don't think that you need to support the policy as it's been drafted. This is genuine desire to get your input to create the policy. So just because I've suggested that we walk down a path aligned to .nz in New Zealand, feel free to shoot it down in flames. It's not a criticism of me or anything I've done. This is trying to get your input about what you want. So if you are wanting to be critical of anything that I've said, please feel free to do that. I won't be insulted at all, okay?
Thank you. So we can have 4 groups outside to sit around in groups and have the discussion, please. Thank you. Okay, you have 5 minutes, and then we come back inside.
Thank you, everyone. Okay, the question is, why should they be reserved name list in .vu registry? We had a quite intense discussion on that. Basically, it is important to have a restricted name. Of course, there will be dispute arises, but we thought there should be a certain group of people should look into disputes with regards to domain names. Reserve name is another way of making money. So if I reserve a name and someone else wants that name, then it's a way of they can buy that name out from me. Policy should protect the people of Vanuatu as far as .vu is concerned. We should work together. The entire ecosystem should work together to have a best policy in place. Again, we don't want to over-regulate, but we need everyone's input in order to have a proper regulation or policy in place. Thank you.
Thank you, Norm. Where's our next team leader? Over here. Thanks very much.
Thank you. I think, first of all, I'd say that the Vanuatu is a very beautiful country. We have some uniqueness compared to other countries in the world. We have a very good traditional values. We have a way of life. We were voted 2 or 3 times as the happiest people on the planet. I think we have also a very good Christian, I would say, good moral values advocated by all our various church denominations in Vanuatu. Obviously, with development, there's a lot of challenges. We will overcome a lot more challenges. I think we are one of the safest places in the Pacific and in the world. I think when we started to discuss the policies and regulation around .vu, we have to be mindful of that. And I think that policy needs to take into consideration and protect that uniqueness of Vanuatu. Whatever that policy is, we want to minimize less dispute. We don't want fight. We don't want a lot of court cases. We don't want to promote violence between communities. We don't want to create disputes, for especially land disputes or chiefly disputes, which is quite a norm these days. So we think that if we are not very careful with how we develop policies and regulation around .vu, it could create problems. So hence, the group decided that we should not allow it to be open. There should be a reserve list. And I think that the reserve list should be, we should come up with a catalog of names of what should be in the reserve list. And we think we should not reinvent the wheel, but I think we should just look back to the current governing structure of the government. For example, the culture, Vanuatu Cultural Center, they are an advocate, and I think they look after all the policies around customs, culture, Ministry of Lands, they look at the lands, business, Department of Customs, and VFSC, they look at all the business registration and etc. And also we have the government, which they are responsible for education, health, meteo, forestry. So we think we should come up with a governance structure of how to create the reserve list. And I think I'm very mindful that it could sound very bureaucratic, and as we know in government things can be very slow, but I'm sure with all the smart people around TRR and the industry and within the PM's office and finance, you could come up with a very efficient and effective way to make sure that we do not have too much lengthy process to approving names. I give, for example, a particular example is cultural center. I think they are familiar with all the names of the islands, all our very sacred tapu places. I think no one should go, any individual or private or any government organization should just go and register a name of a place. They should first consult with the cultural center. If I give another example, it's Ministry of Health. I think no one should just go and register any disease. Just get the names and start, for example, malaria.vu, dengue fever.vu, AIDS.vu. I think that should be coming from the Ministry of Health, etc., etc. We should avoid, I don't know who will be responsible, but we should avoid all the part words, part languages. For example, part languages in the local languages. For example, someone from EFAT just registers a part language from Tana and the .vu. Imagine how that could trigger violence between the two communities. Sorry, I think the 3 minutes up. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you. So, where's the next team leader? Who was next? Oh, thank you.
Why should there be a receipt name list in the BU? We found many reasons, many good reasons. One is the branding, as many of the two colleagues mentioned already. So the branding for the country is very important with VU. And many advantages and disadvantages for the reserve list. So we thought we need good policies to manage the registration to reduce the risk not to allow others to open the reserve list. So there are many, many opportunities there, but we need good regulator to control the reserve list. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. That was a very short and succinct comment. And the next team leader?
Thank you. Parts of our discussion has already been mentioned with the discussion of previous group. The importance of the reserving of names. We talk about the values of the word that are being exposed to be used. So we think that since the Intellectual Property Office, it's currently under the Ministry of Trade, and we're working with the Ministry, I'm from the Ministry of Justice, and we're working along with the new Traditional Knowledge Bill that intended to preserve and register all, as mentioned by previous colleagues, to register all the names and custom areas, the type of place in Vanuatu, and I think the same principle is the same. We need to reserve the intellectual elements of these names and the foreseeable beneficials commercially in order to maintain these words. And we think that it's kind of link the principle of reserving these words through the .vu fall in line, and we encourage working along in terms of the preserving of this as a reserve list. I think that's the contribution from this our group. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And there was one more group, was there? 4 groups. Okay. Okay. It seems to me from that. Oh, was there another comment there, George? We've still got a few minutes. Does anyone have any additional comments?
Sorry, I've got one additional from one of the members, which I thought it was quite important, is we have to be very careful as well with the names, because it could, if we register, for example, let's make an example, terrorist.vu. If we're not careful with that, we could be blacklisted. And we've had, I'm sure all of us, especially from ISPs, my experience in the government, we've been blacklisted in the past for some things which are not done right, and that has affected our email systems that was down for a few days. So I think if we're not careful with the registration of names, it could potentially affect the internet infrastructure for the country, and that could have a serious impact on the whole economy, even for 1 or 2 days. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else got any other comments that arose during your discussions? Okay, I think your input has been really, really clear. You're clearly feeling that a restricted namespace is appropriate for .vu, and as I said, I'm not going to get upset about that. I think that's the community speaking. So can I ask you all to go online on the TRR website, trr.vu, and you'll see the CCTLD consultation documents there, and just make the views that you've made here today through that submission process, so that we can then evaluate them and try and come up with a policy that encapsulates what you've suggested. Andrew, I think on registration everyone's got their email address, so afterwards can we email out the link to the documents? So we'll make it as easy as possible. We'll give you a link to the actual part of that policy that matters, and what you've said is entirely valid and appropriate, so if all of you can do that, it will help us create the policy that you want. While you're at it, there's 5 different policy documents there, quite substantial. There's 100 or so pages of reading, but if you have an interest in the way .vu will develop, have a read through, and if there's other things that concern you individually, also make comment on those, because there's a lot of other activities there that are really difficult to judge without community input. One thing about the policies, though, too, is when the policies are rolled out and put in place, they will be subject to review quite frequently. So I think what I'm taking is you want quite heavy restrictions to start with, and then maybe on review, when you look at what has happened in hindsight, you might opt for more open policies later on. But all credit to you for coming up with some really sensible input, and please don't go home and forget all about it. Go home and tell TRR exactly what you're thinking, even if it's just the 3 or 4 lines or half a dozen comments that you've made. Most important. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Keith, and everyone. Let's give us a big round of applause for that session. Thank you. We will now have break. You have been a very good audience. You're in time, so we'll have a break, and we'll come back. And Adley from APNIC will do a presentation on content security, and then we'll have more discussion. I believe this is an interesting topic. So we'll have more engagement in this. So take a break, have a coffee and water, and then we should start again at 10:45. Thank you. will be starting in 2 minutes, so take up your seats. Just some housekeeping. Toilets are right at the back there on my left. And we will be having a lot of interactions in the next session. So please be reminded when you get a mic, say your name and your organization every time you hold the mic to speak, so that our viewers and our people online can know who is speaking. Thank you. So for our next session, we have Adley and Clay here from APNIC. They will be facilitating the next session. So I'm giving them the mic. And thank you, Adley and Clay.
Thanks. Hey everybody. So I'm Clay and that's Adley setting up the slides right now. So this session is all about a safe and secure internet. So we're going to kind of change it up a little bit from what's on the agenda, make it hopefully a little bit more interactive and a little bit more interesting. But just to get started, we kind of want to see who's in the room. So who here is from government? No one from government? All right. What department are you guys coming from? Justice. All of you? FYU? Okay, cool. And then we have the regulator, obviously. They're the ones setting this up. And do we have any telcos? Okay, cool. And do we have anyone who would be considered a user? That should be everybody. Come on, guys. You're obviously using the internet if you're here. Anyone from any students or teachers, academia, anything like that? No? All right, so there's a lot of people who haven't raised their hands yet. So does anyone else want to volunteer where they're coming from, what kind of stakeholder group they're identifying with? You guys? Yeah? Okay, what? Okay, cool. What does that stand for? Okay, very cool. All right, and anyone else? All right, cool. It's a good group. It's good. We got different views from different areas. So we're gonna try and pick on you guys a little bit as we go through the presentation and we go through the day, just so we can get the different perspectives in and make sure we have a little bit of a fuller picture. You all set with the slides? Okay. So when we're talking about safe and secure internet, what is it exactly that we're trying to protect? So from the different perspectives, just shout out some things that you're trying to protect. So let's start with the telcos. From the telcos, when you think safe and secure internet, what kind of things are you trying to protect? Yes.
User experience, attacks, and malwares, and also normally attacks and malwares, and the actual user experience that has to be provided from the telco end.
Okay, cool.
In terms of DNS, in terms of our management and our VUNIC, all those things.
Okay, very cool. Can I put you on the spot too?
Customer privacy, just to add to Vish's comments, all of those things, plus customer privacy and data security. It's probably the main things we're looking to be able to protect from a telco perspective, is our customers' rights to full privacy of their internet usage.
And you pass it on to these guys from a regulatory perspective. What kinds of things are we looking at?
Well, this two things here, safe and secure. So to be safe, you need to have secure, infrastructure in place. And to be safe online, that's from a consumer awareness, that's another thing. But I think there's two components in here, secure and safe, that's two different things. Thanks.
Okay, can you pass it back to the guys from the finance group? Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, so from your perspective,
Wendy Garay, National Council of Women. To have security is very important to any organization. If we want to set up any organization, we have to put security because it's very important. And this moment when we come here to go through that network, it's very important to secure any network that we want to organize. So as a representative of the women, I think it's very important that we have the security. Thank you.
maybe pass it down the line. Who wants to say something? If not, just continue passing it to the next person. Putting you guys on the spot. If you don't want it, just pass it down. That's it. When it gets down to you, government folks, someone's got to speak up. No? Oh, it's on you now.
Okay, cybersecurity from the FIU perspective, it's more to do with the scam and other cybercrime related issues.
Because of all the work that has to happen with the DOS attacks, that's one thing. You need to look at the base systems that you use to protect you. Very, very important. It can't be stressed any further than making sure that its primary one will be attacked. So this is something that's really important, and it's more at the user level, it's education. Most people are not IT freaks. They don't understand that.
We kind of forced to speak. Cybersecurity was clearly really important. Whether you call it a user's experience, you call it a customer, you call it a citizen, for all stakeholders, it's really important. So I'm going to pass it on to Adley, who actually knows something about security, to kind of dig into it a little bit more.
All right. Thank you, Clay. Hello, everyone. My name is Adley. Both of us are from APNIC. Did you tell everybody who APNIC is already? So APNIC is the regional internet registry. We're based out in Brisbane, Australia. We're actually here to do another workshop related to security response. And we're very pleased to be invited to this event as well to speak about our experience doing cybersecurity throughout the region. And from what I've heard, all of you seems to be aware what cybersecurity is. So I think we're done here, right? No? All right, so I thought of doing this slightly different. So the first maybe 20 minutes, I'm going to look at some fundamental issues in cybersecurity. I think everybody have some ideas of what cybersecurity is, but let's try to get on the same page. Or you can tell me what you think of how we approach cybersecurity from our presentation. From there, right, we have an interactive session of handling a security incident, right? So we're all going to pretend to be working for the same organization, and we will experience a security incident. And this is where I would like to get some inputs from all of you on how you will go about dealing with an incident, and then we can discuss, what are some of the, way forward, maybe some best practices, or maybe some opportunities that we can actually collaborate on or work together in Vanuatu, for instance, right? So that's the game plan, basically. Okay. So I'm sure you have read somewhere or on the internet, or if you've been following news and things like that, people talk about the state of cyber something, right? Cybersecurity, cyber crime, cyber Armageddon, right? cyber warfare, cyber this and cyber that, right? So there's a lot of cyber issues apparently that is out there, which means that this issue is very, very critical and close at heart to so many people. And when you are an internet user, you cannot run away from cybersecurity issues, right? I think all of you are already aware of that. This is very common to all as well, I think, when we talk about cybersecurity, right? There are certain goals, right? There are things that we want to achieve, right? So, and everybody has mentioned it already, right? People are concerned about reputation, user experience, right? That could be impacted when you have a security breach, right? And a security breach are those that can affect CIA, confidentiality, right? So I'm a provider. I collect a lot of information about users, right? One day this information is being leaked out on the internet, or someone is selling it, right? So user is at stake, right? Because information about them could be abused by spammers, by currency here, Vanuatu, yeah? It's 100 Vanuatu and not more or not less, right? I trust the system to do it correctly for me. Bank account, right? It is an account that I have the authority or authorized to do the transaction, right? Things like that. So integrity is very critical, right? When it comes to security. And last but not least is availability, right? We are all interconnected, right? We all rely on the fact that the internet is working all the time, every time when we want it to work, right? So what happens if, let's say, for example, the DNS is down, right? So we had a discussion earlier this morning about, you know, trying to come up with policies to, you know, restrict certain words in, you know, for the domains in Vanuatu. But what about the system that is hosting those records? What happens if they go down? What happens if they go down? What happens if you cannot access, you know, systems on the internet? One, it's probably going to make many people angry because they cannot access Facebook or watch videos on YouTube. But think about the system dependencies, right? So we came here through a bunch of airports, right? Everything is systemized, right? Flight information. Where do those come from, right? Maybe from another system, right? Somewhere else. Check-in, online login, and things like that. So potentially, if the system is not available, it can disrupt many activities, right? It could affect, you know, your work, your productivity, and it could also probably affect your lives as well, right? So I think in the last few years, there were a couple of airports within the Asia-Pacific region, I will not mention any countries, that were targeted by miscreants, by criminals, right? And they basically managed to shut down the operations of the airport, right? So let's say, for example, if you're, you know, the flights or the planes are depending, you know, their navigation and whatnot on things like the GPS and so on and so forth, and those things are compromised and they're not available, right? It could affect lives as well. So there are multiple impacts to security incidents when some of these goals are being breached, right? And that should get us to start thinking on what exactly are in those systems, right? So from the security, for example, you are using a computer, right? Where else? In where? Okay. Anyone else? Temporary use. What is that place called? The RAM, right? So the RAM actually stores a lot of information that the computer is actually currently using. Right? So all of this is very, very critical to our understanding of security because this will tell us where and when to protect the data, right? There will be a time when you need to protect the data that is in your computer, right? So imagine somebody comes here and just walk away with my laptop, right? What will happen to my data? Right? It will be at risk, right? Correct? It will be at risk. I will cry, right? Because maybe I forgot to do backup in the last 90 days, but my data is at risk, right? And if you remember previously, when the data is at risk, it means that confidentiality could be breached, or there could be some integrity issues. Someone can make use of my information to trick other people, for instance, right? Or they can just delete everything and data will no longer be available, right? So it will affect my work. It will affect maybe, you know, some system that depends on those data sets and so on and so forth, right? So if you look at applications, if you think of things like email, okay, email is traveling through the internet, right? And if email is not protected, it is not encrypted, then basically any systems where the email is traveling through, the persons who are managing those systems can actually read that email, right? You agree with me? Because why not? If you use a free email service, right? The content of your email, if it's not encrypted, is available to you and systems provider. Correct? Yeah. So if there are confidential things in those emails, right? So you have to ask yourself whether or not you are comfortable of someone else having access to those information if they want to, right? So criminals or bad guys may have motivation, right? And we don't know what their motivations are and when they will have such motivation. But if they want to, and that information is at rest or in motion or in use, people can actually have access to those information. All right, so think about websites as well. Information is probably at rest in some servers, in some database. It's being published over the internet, right? If you are providing an online service where people have to log in, right? They key in their username and passwords. Username and passwords should be confidential. But when those passwords are traveling, right, through the internet, and if it's not being encrypted, right, somebody could probably tap into the network and see what the passwords are, and then abuse that to log into accounts and so on and so forth. Now, in use could be a bit tricky, right? I'll give you an example. There was a group that specializes in stealing information from the RAM, right? And what are they after exactly? So if you've been to, or if you've to hotels, right? You move your credit card, or if you go to a market where you pay with credit cards, right? Then you have the point of sales, right? Where credit card is normally swiped or being put in, right? So there's a criminal group operating out there that specializes on targeting point of sales, right? Because they know at a certain moment some information will be in the RAM, and if they can get that moment and extract that information and send it out to the criminals, right, they'll be good, right? They have that information, right? So data that are in use. And in fact, a lot of people who are doing forensics, right, when we want to know what is running or what is being, what has been done to a particular system, we try to dump the RAM, as we say it, right? Dump the content of the RAM. Then you can see what is running, what application is being used. And in there sometimes you get, keys, somebody mentioned keys, certificates, private keys, and so on and so forth, right? So understanding all of this, right? Understanding all of this will allow us to then think about what kind of controls we can put in place. Typing them, adding a new payee to transfer money, right? If you just want to log in and look at my balance, that's fine, right? So if my password is compromised, you got that, you log in, look into my bank balance, okay, maybe that's okay. But the moment you want to transfer money or add a new payee, then that's why I challenge you. Can you provide the additional factor, which is probably a number that comes to the SMS or a token that we use and things like that, right? And this is to increase the security of the system. Backup is a huge thing, right? That doesn't sound that sexy at all, but backup is very, very critical because we have lots and lots of data, right? The people who are making money through ransomware, right? Maybe you have heard of things like WannaCry, right? Or CryptoLocker. Have you heard of that before? Right? They're making a lot of money simply because people forget to do backup, right? And when data that is of high value to you is at stake, right? And you have no other ways or no other means to get it back, you might be willing to pay for money for it, all right? So let's say you are a photographer, right? You make money taking very nice pictures and so on and so forth, and you have everything on your computer, and one day your computer is locked up. So people, you see a message, pay us in the next 24 hours or say goodbye to your data. What do? Would you pay money? How many people here would probably could pay money? No? No, never. Don't pay the criminals. Don't pay them. Okay, all right. So, and if you are willing to pay money, how much are you willing to pay? So, 1,000, was it Vanuatu? Would you pay 1,000 Vanuatu to get your data back? Yeah? Let's increase that a bit, 10,000. Imagine this is pictures, from the last 10 years, right? You don't have any copy elsewhere. 10,000 Vanuatu. Yeah? 10,000? Let's play with the numbers again. 20,000, 20K. Right? And why would you pay that amount of money, 10,000? Because it's very dear to you, very sentimental, right? Imagine a hospital whose database has been locked up. And it has happened, right? If you Google for CryptoLocker and hospitals, you find many examples of some hospitals that were targeted specifically by the attacker because they know hospital will have something really valuable, right? So in Korea, I think just right after the WannaCry incident. So WannaCry happens, I think, in the beginning of the year. In July, there was another incident in Korea where the attacker went after a web hosting company, right? So the web hosting company has about 5,000 customers, right? And they managed to lock everything up, right? So in the end, it was said that the company paid 1 million USD to get the data back, right? So although sometimes as a security practitioner, I will tell people, don't motivate the criminal, don't pay money to the criminal because you're only encouraging this behavior. But if you are a victim, right? I'm going to ask you, are you going to give my data back? No, then I'm going to pay, right? I'm going to pay to get that data back because that will affect the business, the operations, right? Maybe they will get sued. So maybe they do some cost analysis. If I don't pay and I get sued, I'm probably going to end up paying more, right? So backup is very, very critical when it comes to security, right? And of course, backing it up securely as well. Patch management, making sure that things are being patched all the time because we know attackers exploit vulnerabilities in software or in operating systems and whatnot. Antivirus, resource certification, so using certificates, right, to verify that you are actually talking to the machine that you're supposed to be talking to, right? So we use certificates for that, right? And in fact, even in routing, for secure routing, right, there are some usage of certification, right, for making sure that this is the party that is allowed to make announcements. And how do we verify that? We check the certificate, a digital certificate, right? So certificate or digital certificate is very critical in security. Code signing, so applications that we install on our phones, right? How do we verify that it comes from the trusted developer? How do we do that? Or how do the operating systems do that? Code signing, checking, right? So the code has been signed, right? And I can verify that, oh, this software that I'm downloading from the internet comes from Apple or comes from this developer and that developer or Microsoft and so on and so forth, right? So, and all of this is to ensure availability, confidentiality, and integrity, right? Okay, time. Policies and procedures must be in place as well because then it will tell us how we can implement security properly, right? But most important of all, I think, is the people who are managing the system or who are users. They have to be aware of all of this. But then again, not everybody, can understand the technical aspect of security, which is fine, right? We just need to make sure that people are aware of the issues and advise them on the best way forward on how to protect system or protect what is valuable to them. So at least they can think before they do something. That's very critical, I think. And last but not least, when it comes to security, trust is an essential component, right? Why? Because in many cases, we are interacting with people or with systems that we don't meet at all, right? You get an email from a prince to say that I have a lot of money, my parents just died, and I would like to share this wealth with you, right? So you get a lot of that, right? The 419 scam, right? Or the Nigerian scam, as they call it, right? Or you get people on Facebook to say that, hey, you look very attractive and I have some money, I want to invest money in your country and buy some property, can you help me with that? right? So we are dealing with a lot of that trust issues on the internet. So verification, validation is very critical. And especially when we are interacting with systems, with computer systems, with routers, with firewalls and all of that. And when it comes to trust, in many cases or many instances these days, there's a lot of outsourcing, right? So we ask another party to manage our security, right? And there's two sides of the coins here. One is that the person that we trust to do security must be good at it, right? Because they could then become a target of the bad guys if they cannot manage the security properly. And number two, right, we need to trust them not to abuse information or trust that we have given them, right? Okay, so when you think about security controls, right, a few terms should come in mind. It's not possible to do everything, number one, and this is where you have to manage the risk, right, so that you can prioritize. Number two, there's a cost to this, right? Sometimes you have to invest some money to buy applications, to buy software, or you can use open source and free software, but you still have to invest time in educating or training the people on how to use it, how to configure it, and so on and so forth. When we apply security controls, what we are doing is basically increasing our preparedness, right? Because nasty things may happen, right? But if you are more prepared, right, then you could probably reduce the possibility of something bad impacting you in a very severe way, right? And if you start to think about all of this, you start to think about your own capabilities. Can I do this myself, right? If not, where can I get some help, right? So you get to think about where to get help. Can I trust this organization or these people? And what are the skills that are missing within our organization, for instance? Okay, so fast forwarding, how much time? All good? More or less. Okay, just gonna do a few more slides. So when it comes to security, there are some security mantras, right? So number one is you are as strong as the weakest link, right? So what does this mean? It means that the criminals or the bad guys will go through the easiest way possible, right? If I want data from you, maybe I don't have to perform, very sophisticated hacking, typing really fast as they do it on TV, right? Just typing really fast, access granted, right? So maybe it's faster to just come and follow you and steal your laptop, or walk into the office and steal the phone, right? So security, you are as strong as your weakest link, right? So your security is my security as well, because there's a lot of interdependencies. And my security is also your security, right? Because sometimes I could be a source where attacker go after, right, to get access to your system or to information that they want, other people. Principle of the least privilege is very important in security, which basically means that we only give privilege to what is required to the operators or to the user, right? So if you are setting up a system for a normal user, they don't need administrative access, because that will open the doors for other risk, right? And if their system are being compromised, right, automatically the attacker will have access of an administrative user, right? When I used to work for a bank, right, my boss told me this, right? Do whatever is needed so that we don't become tomorrow's headline, right? The image of the organization is very critical, right? So any security incident or security mishap could affect the organization, right? These days, sometimes you hear about offense is defense, like, before being attacked, let's attack first. So we don't want to go into anything like that, right? Because that's security at a different level. Okay, so Clay has mentioned about the ecosystem, right? So security ecosystem has a lot of players: public safety, users, certs, software makers, vendors, operators, regulators, and somehow they have to collaborate and work closely together. And that's very important, because sometimes we have things like this, right? Smart light bulbs leak Wi-Fi password, right? So imagine people are using this at home, right? And we are aware of this problem, but how do we get it fixed, right? How do we tell users that they are exposed, right, to such vulnerability? How do we get them to fix stuff? How do you get the vendors to issue patches? And how do you get the patches at home, right? So you can take this example to so many other things that we're using, right, that we have in our ecosystem. This look familiar, right? right? What is this? A very harmless router, right? So do you know that this harmless router is responsible for launching a lot of distributed denial of service attack, right? Because on that device, it is often misconfigured with things like open DNS resolvers, right? And sometimes there is very weak authentication. So they get compromised easily by attackers just by scanning the network. And then those devices are being used to launch attack on some other servers or network, right? So this is where I think all the stakeholders have to cooperate and collaborate to get the word out and to make sure that everybody do their part in ensuring security and safety and stability of the internet. When it comes to security, you'll find a lot of frameworks, right? So the only thing I want to mention here is that all the frameworks are very, very useful, right? And they help to allow you to see the big picture when it comes to doing security in the organization or for your own usage. A little bit about capabilities or capacity, right? Capabilities is not just about training. So I think when it comes to security, the core is the people, right? And this is where you need to think about how do you get these capabilities, right? Technology is one thing, right? Process is definitely another thing, but the core is the people. So how do you get these capabilities within the society, right? Within the community itself. And to me, it's not just about training. Training is probably the first step, but also think of other means or other ways to educate and bring more interest or more people to be interested in security. So we think about mentoring, train the trainer, having more community events, internships, site visits, right? Getting them into trust groups, right? And some joint activities like, in Asia Pacific region, there's this thing called the Asia Pacific third annual cyber drill, right? Where they exercise, simulate incidents so that people can be more prepared. Users' privacy or users' information are not exposed at the moment. Any questions? Any thoughts? Yes?
I'm from TRR.
Yeah.
Okay, Claire, thank you. Sorry, Emily, thank you very much for that very important presentation. I have a question, and maybe you can explain. A lot of people are using social media, Facebook, and there's an issue of fake news coming up. Is that part of security? Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
All right, so the question is about fake news, right? So recently, this has come into the radar of the security community. So social media sites are very powerful in a sense because this is where you can find everyone. So everybody is there, right? So this makes it very interesting target for criminals or actors who are interested. The other aspect that is a bit grayish is the content issues, right? So normally control or regulate on the provider side, right? So what do I mean by this? Generally speaking, if you go to sites like Facebook or Twitter, they will have the terms of use, right? You're not allowed to do the following. You're not allowed to engage in the following, activities. You're not allowed to do this and that and so on and so forth, right? And sometimes the activity that we are trying to control